revolving door between business, the army, and the government. It's important to know that the so-called perpetual war that we've been in for many years really fosters the need, or has created a need, for contractors, groups like Texas Instrument, who used to do computers, to develop sophisticated surveillance technology. And one of the reasons the government contracts so much out is that US government personnel aren't trained in how to use that equipment, so they rely on contractors. Now, history shows us that governments, if they have power, will abuse it. We had COINTELPRO with the spying on activists, active disruption of Martin Luther King Jr., many other people's lives, the Black Panther Party, vilification of them. It ended when the activists broke into the FBI offices. My field, really political dissent, and there's a quote from Justice Lewis Powell in a lawsuit. The US District Court was a very important lawsuit in '72 that asked, can Richard Milhouse Nixon spy, conduct warrantless wiretaps without a search warrant? And the answer was no. But he said that the danger to political dissent is acute when the government attempts to act under so vague a concept as the power to protect domestic security. And that's really the bottom line. That's the argument since 9/11 that's being used to keep us in this surveillance state. And why I said earlier that I don't think we're any safer, and a lot of legal experts agree with that, is because they're collecting too much data. And Gus Hunt from the CIA said last year, the value of any piece of information is only known when you connect it with something else that arrives at a future point in time. Since you can't connect dots you don't have, it drives us into this mode of we fundamentally try to collect everything and hang on to it together. And that's what's happening now. That's why people are concerned that Obama and other leaders are just amassing as much data. It's really a race to collect the most data. Now, corporations monitor all of us, but they especially track activists, especially those who try to draw attention to corporate policies that hurt us, things that are bad for the environment or our health. Jeremy Skakel in 2010 wrote that Monsanto hired subsidiaries of the mercenary firm Blackwater, these are military groups, to spy on domestic activists. I call them green squads. These are animal rights activists. Well, they're the police that go after and infiltrate animal rights activists. In Great Britain, 10 female environmentalists sued Scotland Yard a few years ago, alleging they were lured into long-term intimate relationships with undercover officers. From 1987 to 2010, 2 of these undercovers fathered children with the women they were spying on. Now, in the US, we do this too. Now, I don't know of examples of people fathering, but I do know of examples of people having romantic relationships, agents who get involved with young activists and then encourage them to engage in unlawful activities. One FBI agent said, this is from a file, the animal rights movement does little research on newcomers into the movement and basically goes with its gut instinct as to whether a person is an informant or not. And it's true that a lot of these movements are nervous about having infiltrators. He said organizers can be discredited and removed by the scene, those are the good organizers, by an agent planting rumors that they are informants. And this is what happened during COINTELPRO, and it's happening now. The National Lawyers Guild, as I mentioned, was spied on for 3 decades. They had over 1,000 FBI agents on our little grassroots organization. The Center for Constitutional Rights, the People's Law Office in Chicago represented members of the Black Panther Party. They had FBI agents who rented a room across from their office, filmed them and read their mail. Why does this matter to you? It matters because, again, spying on lawyers chills that zealous representation that a lawyer is mandated to have with a client. It also makes young attorneys fearful about representing unpopular clients. Spying on the press. Two-time Pulitzer Prize winner James Risen from The Times, researching this book, bestseller, State of War. The government got his credit reports and bank statements, monitored his email, his phone communications, when he was talking with former CIA clandestine officer Jeffrey Alexander Sterling. Then they kept issuing subpoenas, 3 in all, to get Risen to come in, to try to get him to divulge his sources. A young man named Josh Wolf in the Bay Area was at a protest, took a videotape. The police wanted it. And he did 226 days in jail for refusing to hand it over. Why is this important? Because it shows that when the officers couldn't get their own team of activists, they pressured a young activist on the scene. Then spying on the press, the Hewlett-Packard scandal from 2005, they engaged, the term I couldn't remember before was pretexting. They impersonated 9 journalists from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and Business Week to try to get information about board members from HP who they thought had leaked negative information about it. And that's Patricia Dunn, their former chairwoman. She resigned shortly after, but some people felt she was scapegoated during that. So how do we restore the balance of privacy and technology? Because technology is here to stay, and I have to mention, as you know, there are many wonderful uses of technology. RFID chips are being put in surgical sponges because apparently sponges left behind after surgery, there's a high incidence of them getting left behind and then becoming infected. But if they have an RFID chip in them, after the procedure, you can scan over it to see if there are any sponges left. I'd want one. Brush fires, dangerous situations where law enforcement can't go in. Oh, that's drones, sorry. But drones, RFID technology, all have good purposes. Sending an unmanned aircraft vehicle, a drone, into a brush fire or into a dangerous scenario saves lives. And anyone who has a pet with a chip in it knows that it's reunited hundreds of thousands of lost dogs in this country because of an RFID chip. But as I mentioned before, we're losing the hallmarks of good government, which is supposed to be transparency, national security, oversight, quality control. We don't have that with contractors. And that group I mentioned, the Privacy and Civil Liberties Oversight Board, did a report on NSA bulk data and found there wasn't enough strong showing that it was effective to justify altering that healthy relationship that we're supposed to have with government. You may say I have nothing to hide. Well, and this was in a book written in the 80s by a man, David Burnham, who really predicted, those were the early stages of computers, but he predicted they would be taking over really our daily lives. He said, those who ask that often seem unaware that personal privacy has been considered a valuable asset for many centuries, and is not just a faintly hysterical fad of the age of technology. This is Louis Brandeis. Andy Warhol did a photo of him, and he was on a stamp, a Supreme Court justice in the early part of the century, and he wrote a very well-known treatise on privacy, saying it's the right to be let alone, the most comprehensive of rights, and the right most valued by civilized men and women. So, just to bring you sort of up to date on what can we do about this. There are a lot of activist groups, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, EPIC, the Electronic Privacy Information Center, the ACLU, filing litigation, educating the public. Legislation called the U.S. Freedom Act is being considered now, and I think that our legislators know that they have to, A, know more about what is happening in the intelligence field, and they have to ask probing questions. And it doesn't mean, by consulting with the public about a new program, that we're forfeiting national security. In Great Britain, which is heavily surveilled, there have been times when they brought proposed surveillance programs to the public, and the public said, no, that goes too far. And I think we need more of that dialogue. A couple of groups, the custodians of democracy, I call them in the book, Campaign for Commercial-Free Childhood. They pressured Walt Disney to stop falsely marketing baby Einstein videos. I've never seen them, but they marketed them as being educational. They stopped Bus Radio, a company that broadcasted student-targeted ads on buses. And they stopped a campaign at McDonald's from advertising on report card envelopes. I mean, I haven't been in school in a while, but I understand there's a lot of advertising going on in the cafeterias. The Electronic Frontier Foundation filed wonderful litigation. They have a case pending now against the NSA. Two women years ago wrote a book called Spy Chips. It's a great book about RFID chips before any of us really had heard about them. I love this story. Andrea Hernandez refused to wear an RFID chip in her high school ID. She sued. She was readmitted to her former high school in exchange for dropping the law school. But the good news is the school abandoned the RFID monitoring program. A 7-year-old didn't want to take part in having his palm scanned to get into the cafeteria. That school district canceled installation of the equipment in schools where it wasn't already installed, and they've removed the biometric palm readers in all their schools. Nicholas Merrill, he got a national security letter. Those are another device, they're like a subpoena, but if you get one, you're not allowed to tell anyone you got one, even your lawyer. But he bravely went to the ACLU and challenged them. And the statute allowing these letters was ruled unconstitutional, and the law was amended, allowing recipients to challenge requests for records and the gag orders. He's for